The Soul Sovereignty podcast is a deep dive into the core wounds and deeply embedded subconscious beliefs that reside within the collective psyche so that you can reclaim your sovereignty and embody your power to experience freedom in your relationships. It is hosted by Jessica Falcon, International Soul Embodiment Guide and Relationship Coach. Visit thepathtosovereignty.com to enter a portal of transformation.
Welcome to another episode of the Soul Sovereignty podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, and special guest today, Chenisse Ouellette. And she is a podcast host of Rich Revolutionaries. She's a new Earth Embodiment and Business Mentor. And we're excited to bring a two-part conversation to you. So on today's podcast, we're talking about sovereign relating and what that means, how we even came to this understanding of how to have a sovereign relationship, which is really about developing a new relationship with yourself. And then in the second podcast on Chenisse's Rich Revolutionaries podcast, we'll be talking about leadership, sovereign leadership. So how we create leadership from this knowing of your inner power. So it's not about power over, it's about power with. It's a very different type of leadership. So we're excited to have this podcast episode on the Soul Sovereignty podcast to be a little bit more of an understanding of what is sovereign relating? How do we come into sovereign relating? Why does sovereign relating matter? Because it's not what we're taught. We are often taught to enter relationships out of need, out of lack. We're taught to see ourselves through the eyes of other people, that our worth comes from outside of us, that our value comes from outside of us. And a lot of people these days are in power struggles, not to mention the collective power struggles that we're in. And so
we'll get into it.
We'll eventually get into a little more of that. And so a lot of this is about coming into your own power, coming into your own individual sovereignty, because you cannot show up in a relationship and experience sovereignty and freedom in that relationship without first creating that within yourself. So let's dive in, Chenisse. I'd love for you to start. What is your understanding of a sovereign relationship?
Thanks for that introduction. It's always funny to hear someone else introduce you and be like, oh yeah, that is me. And I guess let's start from there. Like for me, sovereignty is really being present with that core essence that's within ourselves, rather than all of the layers of conditioning from our family, from culture, society at large, our life experiences, and this one parallel lives that have left imprints on us that leave us with a sense of identity of who I am. And when we come back to that core essence of sovereignty and relate to ourselves from that innermost like unconditional love, I would say, then we are making our choices in a fashion that we're not doing something to perform our power. We're not doing something to get something external to ourselves. We're not like trying to manipulate the people around us, the outcomes. We're really expressing what's on the inside on the outside. And I like to say that like we're incarnating our soul selves. We're fully embodying and inhabiting that energy, that essence, that frequency that is authentic to only us. And in a sovereign relationship to self, it's like other people can have their perceptions of us. Someone can say that we're greedy or that we're only doing things for our convenience or we're selfish or whatever that perception may be from the outside. But it kind of just like, when we're sovereign, we have this aura about us that it just bounces off, and you can see where those perceptions and projections and distortions and psychic attacks are coming from with through the lens of truth and hopefully compassion, because it doesn't mean anything about who I am as a sovereign being. My choices are influenced by, well, personally, my dharmic path and my mission and what I'm actually here for. And that loops back into that unconditionally loving essence, right? Which, don't get it twisted. We have boundaries around here. It doesn't mean unconditional access, unconditional positive regard in the face of, the atrocities and abuse of the world. But what it means is I am emitting this frequency of love internally and projecting that externally as a transmission in this world, regardless of the life circumstances, the people, the places that I move through. It's that I am essence radiating into the world through all of my relationships, right? Because that internal relationship of soul sovereignty is going to become the baseline for relating with everything in our life, right? With people, with places, with family, jobs, friends, all of it. So for me, in a nutshell, that's what sovereign relating means.
Yeah, yeah. And what I'm hearing, and this is the way that I say it, so I'll just put this into my words because we have a very similar understanding of what sovereign relating is it's knowing the truth of who you are, coming into the truth of who you are, which we can only do through self-knowledge
Mhm.
and developing that relationship with our inner self, our soul self. And then we learn how to radiate the truth of who we are into the world rather than taking the world in and making it ours. And to me, that's sovereignty. It's living from the inside out. And
Mhm.
this happens in layers.
Oh yeah.
This takes time
Mhm.
because I've been on this path of sovereignty since 2008 in very different ways. And I will say that even this week, I'm coming into a new level. It's not like
Mhm.
we become sovereign and then we are forever, right? Like done and complete and we no longer evolve, right?
What
We're
would be the fun of that?
constantly, right? Why we're not here for stagnancy. There's nothing
Mhm.
on this planet that is stagnant. Only
Mhm.
humans can stay stagnant through their resistance to change. And the
Mhm.
reality is that we're constantly evolving. And that's part of sovereignty is to allow everything to become an opportunity for more growth
Mhm.
rather than seeing things as problems we have to overcome. And I see this in sovereign relationship as being very important because if we are seeing a trigger in a relationship as a problem we have to fix or overcome or leave or depart or get scared
Mhm.
of, and we make it wrong, versus this is an opportunity for me to see what I need to see, to come into deeper self-ownership, to come into deeper self-worth, to come into deeper embodiment of my power, to
Mhm.
choose and not to, and if we find ourselves reacting even, right, to then notice
Mhm.
we're reacting and shift into more responsive sovereign state. And I say this because even in the collective, which I know we'll dive into more in our conversation about leadership, everything, it might be triggering, it might be difficult, but we cannot become sovereign without seeing the shadow. And things are
Mhm.
coming to light on purpose so that we can go, oh yeah, look at this. We can't ignore it anymore, this trigger, this external thing happening in the world or in ourselves. We, as you said, unconditionally open to receive it and love it and allow divine love, allow the truth of our
Mhm.
soul to transform that
Mhm.
so that we're coming back into union with the divine within all that is, and no longer turning away from or separating from anything to find our power, right? Which is
Yeah.
that old form of kind of denial or domination of the earth, domination of
Mhm.
the body. These are wounded forms of power because true power doesn't need to turn away from anything. It stares at it, it looks at it, it
Mhm.
faces it, and it says, I have the power within me to transmute this. I have the
Mhm.
power within me to recognize my divinity, even when no one else around me can. And when we enter into relationship, leadership, as we'll talk about with that perspective, I believe everything really shifts. Is that your experience as well, or what would you like to add to that?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's been my experience. And I'm just thinking of like um bring it into a nervous system lens. I always like to ground it in there for people. And when we're sovereign relating, we really are in that like open, receptive state of our nervous system where we're able to have access to that metacognition, that like critical thinking. And when we are, quote unquote, triggered, what's being triggered? Well, it can go either way. It can be a collapsed nervous system state where we're going into codependence or victim consciousness, where we're wanting to blame other people or circumstances for the our experience in life, or it can go to the other side of the spectrum. It can be hyperarousal, where we're in independence, where we're fighting against people and going into this isolated martyr state to protect ourselves. And either way, we're leaking power because, like you were saying, true power with is interdependence, where we're openly accepting our sovereign responsibility in our part that we're playing in a relationship dynamic, as well as being able to hold space for understanding of somebody else's role in that and come into a evolved dynamic both individually and together. And this is like a concept in psychology of mutual flourishing, and that's the intention really of any relationship is to mutually flourish, is to be in that growth and evolution. And sometimes that'll happen through growing together, and sometimes it'll happen through growing apart. And
Mm-hmm.
so the example from my life I want to share with this to ground it in even deeper out of the conceptual realm of the mind for people, as we learn best through story, is a friendship that I had for 10 years. She's my best friend, longest friendship that I really have. I'm more of the type of person that I'll have these big rebirths, I like to call them, and kind of reinvent my entire life from my community, my friendships, where I live, my job, my likes, my dislikes, like complete identity transformation. And somehow still this person had remained with me through many of these. And there was a situation that came through our relationship where she had revealed to me that there had been a pretty big betrayal that she'd been hiding for a couple years. And in her sharing that, she kind of was just like, oh, okay, well, now everything's back to normal. I was like, oh, wait, hold on, no. Because what was going on at a deeper level for me there, I, in that moment, had confirmation of where I'd been betraying myself. Because I had a sense that something was happening in the dynamic, that there was places I was overriding my intuitive felt sense, which my strongest sense is like in my body, very clairsentient. And so that anger that arose without making it mean anything wrong, without projecting it at her, was a catalyst for me to actually look at where I was also overriding my intuitive sense and remaining complacent, remaining stagnant, remaining in these templates of codependency of just, well, this is how things have always been. This is my best friend. And so overlooking a lot of the ways that we were actually stifling each other in our growth. And so took space from that relationship. And in doing so, another big rebirth experience happened where that's when I launched my online business. It's when I moved away from where I was living in a small mountain town in Western Canada to Mexico with my partner, and expanded my business into a global community, which we'll get into in the leadership aspect as well. And so when we are allowing for this fluctuation to happen in our relationships with other people, it's this bidirectional influence, right? It's going to allow us to come into more sovereignty. And by clearing those pathways of, the places that we are numbing ourselves from the things that we actually know, or holding off on making big life-altering decisions that are really scary, and all of those things that are just, kind of lingering under the surface that keep us in our comfort zone, can be the catalyst to that next layer of sovereignty when we allow for that like chaotic storm to come through our reality without making it mean anything about ourselves, without making ourselves wrong for it. And I think sometimes when we're talking about these conversations of sovereignty and relating and alignment and all of these beautiful concepts, that there can be a thread of, okay, well, this is meant to like create stability, create predictability, create consistency. And while that like masculine frame is important to dance with, also allowing the like dark feminine of like rage and grief and fear to have its place as well, and allowing the full range of our emotional expression to be part of our sovereign expression and it not just look like one way.
Right, because sovereignty isn't avoidance of anything, right? And sovereignty is having the consciousness to observe that range of emotion and to hold a vision of your divinity that exists beneath it all, so that that emotion is showing you exactly what you need to see. I mean, I go through this all the time, right? I mean, it's not like I have a big emotional body. I feel everything. I have a very tuned nervous system and fascia system, and I'm energetic healer. So I'm aware of energies around me, within me all the time. I'm a channel, I'm a conduit. So I'm right. I know, similar to you, we're always receiving a lot of information, and it's not about numbing out. It's not about pretending we don't feel anything. It's not about any avoidance of our inner state. It's really this, for me, I'm so grateful that when this deep fear came up this week, that I could just allow it to move and allow it to be there and not make it wrong and not make it bad, because it was showing me something I'd been holding deep in my system for lifetimes that was keeping me from my highest expression, from my highest power. And we cannot come into our power and sovereignty if we're not allowing these pieces and parts and energetics to reveal themselves to us, because it's for us. Sovereignty is self-knowledge. We do not know the self when we avoid the self. We do not know the self when we turn away from the self. We do not know the self when we're like, no, not that part. That one's not as pretty. That one's not as nice. I don't want to see that fear. I don't want to look at that doubt. I don't want to look at that pattern that I keep showing up in a relationship. That's not sovereignty. That's denial. It's self-denial. Because all those pieces and parts, the fear, the doubt, those looming whatever, that worry that you have at night, the more you avoid it, the more it's there. Versus sovereignty is, oh, wow, okay, so let me look at this. Let me be with this, with that unconditional love, with that heart open, receptive state, and accountability and responsibility and soul alignment. If we don't see it, we're not aligning it. If we don't see it, it remains in the unconscious. We bring it to conscious, we align it so that we're in more of our soul state. Because for me, a lot of that soul embodiment, which is how we reclaim our sovereignty, is that the more we see that's in the subconscious, unconscious, different people use those terms in different ways. All of it means beneath the level of your conscious mind. That if we're not seeing it and bringing that love and conscious observer capacity to it, then we're not able to bring our soul light into those places that have been held by that quote darkness. We're not able to bring our soul light all through our body if we're not in our body moving out the survival fears that have been embedded in humanity for millennia for a reason, because they've been using it to control people and keep us from our divine state. And so when we access that divine state, transmute the darkness, that's the sovereignty, not turning away from the darkness and labeling it low vibration. That is not how we do that. Same in the world. Same in the world. We don't look at it and go, well, I'm just going to pretend that's not there. We literally are consciously transmuting it without identifying with it, without getting lost in it. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to call that life alchemy, right? And there is this overarching like categorization of like low vibration, of darkness, of whatever, of these like survival places, or I know a lot of people even cast it as like demonic. It's like, well, if you don't know your demons, the collective demons, how are you ever going to evolve? I made a vow, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago now, to every day look at fear in the face in order to evolve the collective. And so it doesn't mean that I'm never going to get overcome by it. Of course I am, because that's part of the embodiment. But in that, knowing it's like, okay, even if I'm knocked off center, even if I'm showing up in these survival states or these outdated templates, I know that I have got my back. Like my relationship to divinity has got my back, so that when that happens, the time frame coming back to center, coming back to that sovereign expression is going to be getting shorter and shorter and more efficient. And the what we'll get into more in the next episode is that that gets to be the content, the programs, the gifts that we serve. And so it's really this reciprocal loop that's happening. The more we go into what is driving us, because 95% of our conscious our behavior is driven by the unconscious, the subconscious. I like that you made a note there of the different parts. I personally love to use Jung's framework of the consciousness. It allows a lot of nuance and discernment there, but we're not going to get too much into that. When we go to those places, then what we're actually able to serve from, what we're actually able to create is that new earth reality. Is we're using each of those energetics, each of those somatic holding, because it's as much our mind as it is our body, right? They're not separate as some people would like to think. So we'll have thoughts that are, either collapsed or hyper independent, but that's matched with sensation too. And when we allow that conscious awareness of both of them without it having to be this perfect thing, then that's actually when we can make these paradigm shifts to, I like to say, rebuilding the village, because essentially when we are rooted in our sovereignty with self, with each other, and with the land, like we're going to be operating in a very different template of society that is a lot more interdependent. Because this current, like, you have your business, you have your house, you have your family, you have your belongings, is very in that like hyper independent nervous system state. That's why everybody's so stressed the fuck out all the time. So we're not calibrated to the consciousness of the earth that, inherently is reciprocal and interdependent and sovereign, even though there are man-made systems and conditions that are trying to infiltrate that.
And something you said made me think about when we are embodying our sovereignty and coming into that in relationship, it actually enables more of that interdependent, or said a different way, it allows the other person more freedom to express themselves as well. Because when we're not sovereign, and I know this from my own experience, I was so focused on getting my own needs met whether that be being valued by the other person, being desired by the other person, being heard by the other person, that I was more focused on that I couldn't actually hear them or
Mm-hmm.
see them, because my own trigger was blinding me to
Mm-hmm.
their soul and their truth. Because sovereign relating is really about, I am showing up, sourcing love and value and worth and power from within me. You ideally are showing up in that way, but not all people are capable of that, right? So there's difference between experiencing a relationship in which both people are showing up conscious and sovereign, and then being the only one in relationship doing that. And there are different ways of navigating that. And we could possibly get into that in a different conversation. But that, let's say both people are showing up as at least more conscious, wanting to navigate a conscious relationship,
Mm-hmm.
then the more we're able to source from within and show up in that vulnerable honesty and say, this
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm feeling really triggered right now. This is difficult for me, but I want to hear you. So I'm able to set this aside and hear you, and then also respond from my own embodied state, not in a triggery way, not in a way that's trying to control you, not just so I can get my needs met, not just so I'm the
Mm-hmm.
only one that's heard, but so that we can both be heard and honored. And I've seen so many in so many relationships, whether it be friends or with partners, I've seen them be able to show up in a more vulnerable, authentic way as well, based on simply my capacity to hear them and to receive them differently. And men in particular are yearning for that,
Absolutely.
yearning for it,
Mm-hmm.
because they often don't feel like it's safe for them to be and their more vulnerable emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's safe for them to be honest without being attacked for their honesty. And it's in large part because I think women have been, so much of a woman's value has been placed on how much a man desires her. And it can
Mm-hmm.
be really difficult. And this is historically, and
Mm-hmm.
that's part of that reclamation of sovereignty. It can be really difficult for her to then hear him say anything
Mm-hmm.
in which it might not feel like you're desiring me and I'm the chosen one and I'm the only one. And so then he doesn't feel safe, right? And then she doesn't feel safe, versus both people creating internal safety to be
Mm-hmm.
able to hear and see, not with attachment, not with need, not with grasping, but with the freedom of, and I'm okay, and I'm okay. And also, I want us to be okay together by sharing truth, not by making each other feel better because we're soothing our egos. And there's a massive difference, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And like what you speak to there is that process of co-regulation, right? And as a sovereign woman, it is our responsibility to maintain that pull for ourselves. And then that gets to be the gift that we offer our partners as well. And vice versa, right? And
Ideally receive that. Right.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is going to be the one leading with empowered vulnerability that opens the door for the other person also to be heard. But I love what you mentioned there about that, like graspiness, because that's the fight response. That's the like, I need this. And it just completely erodes the connection. Because then we're in this transactional energetic where it's like I'm trying to get something for you. It's two-dimensional versus when we're in that reciprocal flow, it's like, okay, like I listen to understand, you listen to understand, and that is the exchange versus I need to feel chosen by you. And right, giving ourselves grace in that process because these are very deep rooted in our nervous system, in our like the collective unconscious in the realm of like the archetypal wisdom and trauma, if we want to use that word, that exists within all of us, within the field of belief of the collective. And so I think acknowledging that part too starts to detach some of the personal identification, some of the shame spiral that can happen around being in those dynamics that actually just perpetuates them because we're wanting to shield ourselves from actually acknowledging what is at play versus just allowing it to be seen by ourselves and the other person
That
and
right there.
a third a third party maybe too, right? Like asking for help. Like we're not meant to do everything just in the isolated pressure cooker of a two-person relationship or a nuclear family even.
That what you just said is key. I want to highlight that as we start to kind of close out and venture into the next conversation on your podcast, is that when we have the capacity, because we're spending time with self, developing a relationship with self, seeing whatever arises, not with pushing it back down, not with judging it, not with labeling it, but seeing what arises, that fear, that doubt, that shame, whatever it is, and just letting it be witnessed and ultimately transmuted and aligned to soul truth. But if we're in the middle of a conversation and relationship and we witness that trigger, or I'm feeling undesired, or I'm feeling ashamed, and we name it, and we just name it. So many people are so afraid to name it. But I'm telling you from so much experience from witnessing my clients, when you name it, everything shifts because then the other person knows where you are. You know where you are. You can hold yourself through that when you're sovereign. And even if you can't, you got to come back to it. That's okay. And that other person has the capacity to truly see you because you're not hiding it. Nor are you using it to project onto them, nor are you using it as a trigger and then you're just reacting. You're using it as a vulnerable truth to deeper connection. And
Yeah.
only through that level of self-knowledge can we even have the capacity to see it, to name it, to give the other person an opportunity to also see it and respond to it with love or at least compassion, ideally, right? And
Yeah.
again, this is all an ideal. And also, even when it can't, you have that capacity and you have those tools that you're developing to hold yourself through whatever happens because you're being true to you and you're trusting you and you're willing to name these things and align these things to your soul truth. And that's what it's really about. I just want to mention none of this is about showing up perfectly in a relationship because that's also ego. What is the idea of perfect? Sometimes the best thing you need is a good argument. Sometimes the
Yeah.
best thing you need is a strong boundary, right? This is not about this idea of what is perfection. It's all an idea you have based on the unconscious, you know? And it's the self-responsibility and that self-love, as you named at the beginning, the unconditional love that is encompassing all parts of self. And if we take that into embodied leadership, I mean, look at how much that really changes everything. So I'll save that for our conversation on your podcast, Rich Revolutionaries. And before we wrap up today, any final words, and also where can people find you? And is there, I think you mentioned you have a free gift that you want to honor for the audience.
Yes. Yes. I just have a little nugget I want to leave people with on the note of those conflicts and relationship and even with our relationship with ourselves. If you find yourself in a really big emotional reaction, something that I always come back to is like if it's hysterical, it's historical. So recognizing that part one. And then the second key I want to leave the listeners with is if you feel confused or like things just aren't adding up, it can be really vulnerable and scary to recognize in the heat of a moment, oh, there's something here that I haven't seen myself yet and don't want somebody else to see that. So if you notice that it feels like something's hiding just below your level of awareness, it feels like something's just confusing, then that usually is shame rearing its head under the level of your conscious awareness. And so learning to connect with shame in that way has been a big breakthrough for me, and my relationship with my partner as well. So that's what I want to leave people with. Where people can connect with me, the best place is Instagram at Evolve with Chenisse. And yeah, shoot me a DM if anything in this conversation left you with a question, with an insight, with a aha that you want to share. I'm always open to hearing those things from listeners and keeping the conversation going so it's not just out into the void. And then, yes, the free gift. I have a instant access audio course that I love to offer to people that um, are coming into the podcasting space with me, either on my podcast, Rich Revolutionaries, or guesting on others. And it is my New Earth Business Blueprint. I think 14 audio recordings that'll walk you through building sovereignty in your business architecture. So let's say if you come into my GMs and you um, say either giveaway or blueprint, I can get you that. We'll probably link it in the show notes here as well.
Absolutely. Put it all in the show notes. So just look below. You'll find the links. You'll find where you can contact Chenisse. And we'll put the link to the Rich Revolutionaries podcast, which is on all major platforms, so that you can listen to our next conversation on sovereign leadership. Really excited for that. So we'll see you soon.
See you soon.